And then I would write them an email and be like, hey, my name's Adam Faze. I'm 17 years old. I'd love to come interview in my podcast to Leg Up. The reason I still love short form is it's the easiest place to launch IP. Like, I think YouTube, if you're still talking in the 5 to 12 minute range, like, it's just going to cost more money. Armies of 15-year-olds are spending all their time trying to make their favorite creator go viral.
Okay, guys, we're very excited to come back to another episode of the Hollywood Hang. This week, we have Adam Faze. He is the co-founder and CEO of Gymnasium, the studio behind short-form shows like Boy Room and Keep the Meter Running, which have generated close to 1 billion views across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And in the last 2 years, with only a team of 6 people. We're very excited, Adam. Thank you. An old friend.
From traditional Hollywood.
From traditional Hollywood, met at Sundance, like the
Good
most
old Sundance Film Festival.
The most traditional place to meet.
No longer in Sundance. No longer in Park City.
I know.
It's crazy.
What do we think it's longevity post Park City?
I don't know, because Nick, you hadn't been, but Adam, I felt like
I never got to go.
It was so small. It was tight. Nick just went to
South by.
Yeah.
And he said it was
super
huge.
fun. Yeah, it was massive.
I mean, my thing is, like, I've gone to Sundance for almost 10 years. And like, even that the last 3 years, I've not been in traditional Hollywood anymore. It's like, I still go as a ritual because it's like, it's Sundance. I know I'm going to run into all my friends. I'm going to go see some movies. There's a lot of fun events to go to. I'm going to go skiing. Like, it's a ritual. And because it's been in Park City for so long, I mean, so many people in the industry have houses there. And so, like, you know, a lot of people, I have a friend who has a house there. And so, like, it's our boys trip every year now where we just go together. And I'm not going to go to Sundance and Boulder, you know, and I think obviously people who have to go will go, and people who get invited and have films there will go. But I feel like you are going to miss out on people like me who just go for sort of the fun of it at this point.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like the house thing is very real. I didn't even think about that. But like,
there's an economy built around the festival.
Yeah. Grandview had a house. It was like an epic after party that they would throw. And that will not be
they like owned a house there?
Someone in the company or like someone's like wife's family owned a house there. And so after every like premiere party, they would be like, if you were lucky, you got to go back to the Grandview house. Even like some of the automatic people like didn't always make it to this like exclusive house.
Yeah. Also, most of the top TV film lit agents and talent agents all have houses in Deer Valley, you know? And so it's like, look, they're going to keep them there because Deer Valley is Deer Valley and it's a great place to go skiing and whatever. But again, I just think that you're going to miss a lot more people being like, and that's dangerous. Wrong time to be doing change.
I agree with that because, yeah. And this year, Eric went and he was like, it was quiet. Like, he was like, it felt a little quiet this year. And he was like, and like, we didn't hear any of the splashy sales. But to that, I think this is like my own like conspiracy theory that the studios are very into their own mandates. And so when something doesn't fit perfectly, like it's a really hard time to buy, like for them to buy.
I'll have a hotter take, which is I completely blame the programmers. I think they're programming movies that speak to very few people. And these are the festivals that found, Reservoir Dogs for the first time. Like, we could be finding a brand new generation of filmmakers and making movies that should be in theaters. And instead, I think we're doubling down on movies that like could be watched anywhere. And like, that's actually the wrong advice for Hollywood. It's like, double down on theaters. That's actually the thing that should work.
I literally just made a Substack post today about being like everything that needs to happen we don't need a bowling alley in the theater, you guys. Like, that is just not the cure to.
Nor do I need a shitty, disgusting dinner. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm for popcorn, maybe a drink.
Or I like obsessed with like, I don't know if you guys like in Chicago going to a Cubs game, like going to a Bears game, they do local vendors like for the food. And I'm like, that is also like such a weirdly missed opportunity. Give me like a window burger at an AMC around here and I'm happy.
I also think like in New York, we have the Metrograph, and I love the Metrograph so much. And there's an amazing bar and, you know, they do food there as well, but it's like an actual hang. And so people often just go to the bar there. And I think like that's a good approach too, especially if you're in like metropolitan areas, like build the cool bar and then have the theater right next to it. Cause I do think, I'm someone who thinks reserve ticketing killed the movie industry. And my thing is like, we stopped movie theaters being a third place when we had you see what seats were available first. And so if you can connect a bar to a theater, it can sort of become a third place again where it's like, wait, that's like a 10. We should totally go see that. We have no plans right now. Instead of like, let's have another round.
That's a smart one. Nick, what do you, Nick's a big Alamo. Are you anymore? Is there an Alamo Draft House near you?
I was an Alamo member. Now I'm back to AMC because we don't have, I'm on the west side now in the South Bay, but we have a brand new movie theater called Cinema West, which I apparently is a chain. There's a Pink's hot dogs inside of it. They also have I think they call it extreme, like Cinema X or something, and it's like a 270 degree, like the screens on the sides of you as well.
Oh, so it's like the
You done
dome.
that?
I've never done it. But
I'm
they're
a little
also
bit of a purist where I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that's how we wanted to see these movies.
yeah. And I guess in April, which is now, they're gonna have a 4DX theater that has like 30 different like 4D effects. So like rain, all that kind of wind and stuff.
The only movie I would have been okay with that for was Twisters, because I
Yeah,
already
That was
knew
crazy, though, that people were talking about it.
that would have been like a really fun time to be like, yeah, splash me with some water or whatever. It's Adam, it's funny to hear still how passionate you are about it,
Of course.
about the traditional method, considering your entire trajectory has changed to,
I
which
know.
we will talk about. We will talk about. Okay, so
Yeah.
first though, I want to go back. I know a bit of your lore, your like movie fanboy lifestyle, but will you tell everybody else about it?
But the funny thing is, like, both the people who work for me and also like people in New York in general, they just see me as the TikTok guy now. So like when someone from LA comes, they're like, you don't understand, Adam was like the film guy. Like he was like the most pretentious dick you've ever met about movies. They're like, there's no fucking way. This guy's like watching brain rot 3 hours a day. Like, what are you talking about? But no, I mean, I grew up in LA. So I think I didn't come from a film family, but that almost made me more obsessed because I could like see sets, and I had a Universal Studios annual pass, and like going on that studio tram was my favorite thing of all time. And I'd like watch videos when I'm home of like studio backlots and everything else. So from a really young age, I just got really obsessed with wanting to be involved in making movies and TV shows. And I went to very Christian and Catholic schools that had no video programs and no film families. And when I was in high school, I started thinking about, I only want to go to film school. There's no other way I go to college. And I need to do something to get into film school because USC is like impossible to get into. And so I thought, I got to do something for my like career here at high school. And I ended up starting a film festival there. I was like, look, this school, I don't think anyone's going to submit from the school itself, but if I can email every high school in the country to get their students to submit films, like maybe I could start something here. And pretty quickly the school was like, well, we don't really have resources for this, whatever. And I kind of just, without their permission, just started doing it anyway. And looking back at this experience, I'm like, I don't know how I was not expelled, but I would literally send press releases on behalf of my high school with official letterhead being like, Loyola High School is proud to announce its 150th year anniversary, first ever film festival. I was like a big anniversary at that point. And I ended up getting Mike DeLuca as a guest speaker. I ended up getting like SAG and Sony and LACMA and Final Draft to like donate things for prizes. And we got a story in the New York Times that was talking about this film festival. And in my mind, I was like, I am never going to be written about for anything else again. This is my one chance to get someone to know who I am. And so I told the reporter, I was like, is there any way you can tell people that I'm looking for a summer internship? And that ended up being like the last line of the article. And the next day, I think the only reason I didn't get expelled is because the school got like 50 phone calls from production companies being like, hey, we'd love to offer Adam an internship, at our production company. And that summer, I had my first official job in Hollywood, which was working for David Permit. But what I'll say to sort of like, speed up after that is I ended up graduating high school. I didn't get into USC, even with all of that. I did a semester of community college. I dropped out and I just started working full time in the industry. And that was like both working for producers like John Lesher, but then spending a lot of time just working on set as like a PA getting yelled at as we all have done. And a few years after that was like when I started sort of my first production company, which is when we met.
Yes. Yeah. That was, so then that brings you to Sundance. And in between that, you also did a podcast.
I did. That was sort of like my second cheat code of getting jobs was, Serial was the #1 podcast in the world. We were all talking about podcasts for the first time. And a friend of mine was like, hey, you love talking to people in the industry. What if you started a podcast where you would just talk to your heroes and like ask them for advice? You're 17 years old, you're 18. And the best thing was that around this time, Sony Pictures had been hacked for The Interview. And everyone in Hollywood's email was on WikiLeaks. I literally would just type in a name of who I wanted to meet. And then I would write them an email and be like, hey, my name's Adam Faze. I'm 17 years old. I'd love to come interview on my podcast to Leg Up. And sometimes you'd get, an email back from Guillermo del Toro being like, how'd you get my email? Please don't send this around. But other times you'd end up getting like my first guest ever was Jay Leno. And That was a podcast that also got me a lot of jobs where I would sort of finish the interview and be like, what can I do for you? Like, I'll literally do anything and I'll do it for free, and just let me stay in this office, please. I don't want to go home.
Yesterday, when we had a guest on, I feel like it's such a similar trajectory of being like, I'm going to do whatever, and I'm going to a cold email, kind of fake it till I make it with some confidence. And like, it really is. So the cold email has to be good. Like, I know when I get a good one.
I was insane back then, though. I mean, I'm not joking. Like, I read these emails from me being like, I was like 17 writing emails to Michael Lombardo, who was running HBO at the time, being like, I've got a pitch for you, and it's going to win #1 Emmy of the year. And it's like, who are you? Like, literally, I'm not joking. I look at these and I'm like, where did you come from? First of all, I don't have those balls today, but I'm also like, where did this like ambition come from? I was just so obsessed at that age that like I had to win an Emmy or an Oscar like before the age of 25, and I was like, break some record. And it, it's like funny to look at now, but I really thought it was true back then.
Do you think some of that is from hanging around those producers and kind of being on that like producer track? Because it strikes me as very like producerly in a good way.
It was even before that is the weird thing, and I feel like the producers that I worked for, like David Permit is very much an old Hollywood classic producer where like he knows every lore and every old actor. And, he is sort of that like, I picked up the phone and called them. John Lesher is not like that. He's much more of a reserved, keeps to himself, has incredible taste and really, really talented, people that are close relationships of his. I just think it was like, I grew up with parents who definitely did not want me to be in the industry because it wasn't our thing. Like my dad's a mortgage loan officer. My mom was a realtor. Like it wasn't in our family. And I just think they had both never graduated from university. It was super important that I did. And here's me dropping out to pursue a career in Hollywood. I mean, it's like, it's the worst thing you could tell your parents. And so I just think that like all of that pressure made me sort of have to figure it out a little bit more, where I will say like the dream was never like, I'm going to make this one story. It was less artistry. It was much more like, this is my industry. I love the history of this industry. I love the city. And this is how I'm going to be a part of it, is like by being a producer.
So around that time before you pivoted to kind of more into the stuff you're doing now, like what did you envision for yourself? Were you like, I'm going to be a Hollywood producer? Like what did you think that you were going to be making? Like what types of...
I think the long-term goal was like, I would love to run a studio. Okay, so for me, it was like, let me start.
I can see that for you. I can still see it for you.
Yeah, you got time.
Like, let me figure out first, like, if I can start my own production company, let me get some indie films off the ground. Let's like get some really cool talent attached. And I will say, like, I was lucky to have some great talent relationships at that point. Part of that came from the only way I made money at that age was I was club promoting at night, and met a lot of talent my age who were like actors who would just kind of come onto the scene. And I would just be very honest with them and say, hey, I really want to be a producer. And I love reading scripts, and I'll read any script you get sent and just give you my honest advice on what I think about it. And over time, that did create like these closer relationships where I could send them something and see what they thought. And funnily enough, right around the time, like actually a few weeks after Tepper and I met, it was COVID. Famously, people think Sundance started COVID in the US. I think I got it.
I don't know. Yes, everyone. I went back into the office like after we came back, and everyone was missing, and I was like, "What happened?" Everyone's like, "Oh, I've just kind of got the flu," and then a month later, I was like, "Oh no."
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, podcast became the thing again because it was COVID. We had just announced our company, and I remember thinking like, we could actually turn this into a win because we don't have a slate. We don't have to figure out how to make this $2 million budget work for now a $5 million movie. And instead, we were like, hey, we have all these talent relationships. We also have so many really talented writer friends who have never really been given their shot, or they're like stuck in a writer's room somewhere. We're like, let's go to our writer friends, tell them to write these scripted stories about what we're going through right now, about going on a first date, about moving back in with your parents, about being really stressed out. And let's do this like twice a week radio drama. That's an anthology called Day by Day. And we're going to put all of our talented friends who have nothing to do right now into these stories. And so we actually got it up and off the ground within like 4 weeks. And we ended up getting everyone from like Lucas Hedges to Cami Mendez and Sydney Sweeney, Madeline Petch, Madeline Klein, like all of young Hollywood ended up being in this thing. And they would record the audio on their phones in their bedroom closets. And we got like 1 million downloads, and the thing costed $100. And I will say that was the first time that like did start opening my eyes a little bit of like, the thing to do here is to kind of go around the system. Because if we had pitched this around, which we totally could have done, he probably would have gotten approved and greenlit like a year later, at which point COVID was like already on the way out. And we probably would have had 1/100th of the talent in there too, because all of a sudden, because we had money, we'd have to pay talent too. And I think instead it was like, this was a charitable thing. Every episode highlighted an organization that needed help. And so we had access to all this talent because they're like, hey, like I get to show my fans that I'm doing something for them. And at the same time, no one's getting paid. So like, I might as well just go do this. But that is what was the official start of the production company. And because at that point, the industry started contracting, the real money that we would make would be from commercials and music videos. And just like anything else, the commercials and music videos that I liked doing were the ones that I lost money on. And the ones that I didn't like doing what sort of what paid the bills. And it did at a certain point become this thing where I was like, this is just a job. Like I almost feel like I'm my dad being a mortgage loan officer. It's like, I'm the middleman in making a hair loss commercial for postpartum women. This is not Hollywood. What am I doing? And so around 2021, I had this feeling of like, I don't really know if independent producing is a thing anymore. I don't know if I see like where this connects to where I want to go. I'm willing to close my company to go be an assistant for a head of film somewhere. Let me just get into a big studio and just sort of figure the rest out from there. And someone had then connected me with Adam Paulson, who had just taken over as the head of film at Annapurna. And Annapurna, when I was in high school, I mean, it was pre-A24. Like that was my North Star. Like, oh my God, if I can get Megan Ellison to answer an email of mine. And when I got there, parts of it were amazing. Like I really got close with Adam. I got really close with Sue Nagel, who was there at the time. That office in West Hollywood was incredible. But they were dealing with not really having money anymore and also trying to suddenly become a production company themselves where they wanted to look for the money. And I also felt like, all of a sudden the conversation wasn't like, hey, PTA wants to make a movie, let's throw in cash. Or like, hey, this new filmmaker has this insane story, let's go make it. It was like, well, what could we get made? And I remember that feeling of like, if Annapurna's asking what can get made, like we might have lost the moment. And so at that point, it was also a year and a half into the pandemic. And I was a year and a half into being fully addicted to my phone and fully addicted to TikTok and spending way more time watching TikTok than TV. And so when I was at Annapurna, I started pitching them on this idea of like, what if we built like a talent incubator in-house where like we went after all these comedy creators that were funding on the internet and we just started making like shows with them on TikTok. And I didn't really know what that looked like. No one had ever really made a show on TikTok before. And Annapurna was like, hey, look, this sounds really interesting, but we have no money and like we're focused on the movies that we need to get made. This is like, above our pay grade. And so there was an opportunity to move to New York to work for this digital studio that was more like in the Web3 space at the time. And they were like, hey, we just sold $500,000 worth of NFTs to go make a dating show. Do you want to come to New York and produce this show? And I'm like, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I hate crypto, but if you tell me you have money in the bank, you want to make a dating show in New York, I could probably do that. And so that was January 2022. And I've been here ever since.
And so I didn't realize you produced a dating show. Oh no, yeah. I did.
No, it's on YouTube. It's bad. It's really, really bad. And I would say it's really bad because it's a lot of crypto in there. But what did work, basically if you owned an NFT, you could like vote in the Bachelor or Bachelorette of the week. And then we would have 3 people come on the show trying to like vie for your love. And over the course of 3 challenges, of which I would like hire a baby doula to teach you birthing exercises, you would pick one person. And then that person had the option to like say yes to go on another date and be in the season finale or like walk away with cash. The show itself sucked. It was so much fun to make. But every Sunday we'd have these like live premieres in Soho where we'd have like a bunch of kids in the audience and we went, and then they would watch the episode and we'd go straight into a live talk show afterwards. We'd have like 6 camera operators and it was super like messy and not prepared and the host didn't know what they were doing. But part of that was also like a lot of young people on set being like, this is cool. Like I'm like a part of like a show. I've never been on set before, whatever. And we went from having 100 people in the audience to selling at Webster Hall, 1,000 seats in a series of like 6 weeks. And so it was this weird thing where we had like 10,000 views on YouTube and somehow sold 1,000 tickets in person. And off of the success of that show, again, Pete Crypto, this crypto fund injected $6 million into this company at a $25 million valuation. Never made $1 in their lives, $25 million valuation. And at that point, I joined full time as like sort of like head of content. And I really quickly was like, the crypto wave is exploding like in a bad way. It's blowing up. And I don't really believe in this sort of like interactive content thing. What I do believe is that I am on TikTok hours every single day, and I would love to figure out what it looks like to make a format for TikTok. And so I convinced them to give me a budget of like 25 grand to go make a slate of shows and just see what happened. Like they had so much money. It wasn't like, let's see how we make our money back. It was just like, let's see if you even want this. And so the first person I sat down with was my friend Kareem Rama, who now hosts Subway Takes. And at that point, he was sort of like a local New York City comedian, creator. He had worked at Vice, New York Times. And I was like, look, I think TikTok is television and I want to make TV shows for TikTok. Do you have any ideas for a format? And he goes, I've got this one that I've always pitched around town and no one's ever wanted to make. Like I've always wanted to hail a cab in New York and tell the driver, take me wherever you want to go and keep the meter running while we spend the day together. And I was like, that's the greatest idea I've ever heard in my entire life. And he's like, great. So like, what's the next step? And I was like, tomorrow we're going to go hail a cab and we're going to do it. He's like, wait, what? And we're like, no, tomorrow we're going to go film the first episode of the show. And so the next day we're standing on like 6th Avenue and, you know, I have an FX3, my friend has an FX3 and then it's Kareem. And we keep hailing a cab and each cab that passes by, they're like, I don't know what you're doing. What are these cameras? Like they keep driving off. 7 cabs pass us. The 8th cab comes and the guy says, hey, my meter's broken. If you want to pay me $300, I'll take you where I eat lunch. We're like, that's all we need. So he starts telling us this story that he's got a doctorate degree in geology and he's from Pakistan and he has a family of 8 back home and he only drives a cab to support his family of 8. He lives with 3 other cab drivers who have very similar stories and he's devoted his entire life to Islam. He takes us to this incredible Pakistani joint in the Bronx. And, you know, all of a sudden it's like, it's now pivoted to him giving Kareem like marital advice because Kareem's going through a divorce and like they're really relating on a really friendly level. And on the walk back to the car, Kareem says something to the cab driver like, I really love that we did this. And he goes, I love you. And he's like, wait, what? And the cab driver's like, I love you. I love you. And we all sort of like kind of just start getting emotional. Like this is like really, what a touching experience that we would never have had it not been for this idea for the show. So we get back to the office and we've got about 4 hours of footage that we somehow need to figure out how to get down to like a 1.5 minute long cut. Again, mind you, we've never made a TikTok in our entire lives at this point. And Ari, who directed the show, you know, basically lost his mind in the edit trying to figure this one out. And it took him about a week. And he eventually goes like, I think I have it. And we post the first episode on an account with 0 followers. And because we knew it wasn't going to get any views, we don't really look at it again. The next morning, Kareem is walking into his like corner deli and this guy taps him on the shoulder. He's like, man, I fucking love your show. And he's like, huh? And he's like, the cab show, to keep the meter running. It's fucking amazing. Like, when's the next episode coming out? And Kareem takes his phone out and the episode has 1.2 million views in less than 24 hours. And 99% of those views were in New York City. And so as Kareem like head into the city that day, like the amount of people that would start dapping him up or like trying to buy him a beer and they were all sort of like, they had all seen it. And that was the first day where like the true light bulb went off in my head of like, TV's not dead. It's just in a new place. And like the water cooler conversation that Johnny Carson used to be, he's alive and well, but it's probably on TikTok.
Crazy. And how fast it can happen. Like I love what you said earlier when you were doing the pandemic show about like how you kind of just have to go around the system, because I feel like in this moment in Hollywood, so many people are disillusioned by not only the system, but like how slow, like for how fast you put both of those two things together. It's just, you know, as someone, you've worked for producers, like you see how long it takes to do every single step of everything you have to do on that level. So it's like, why do all that? Why not just do the shortcut version and make it faster, make it yourself?
And I think part of that is like, because this is the way it's been in Hollywood for so long, we then have this idea of like, well, time is what makes these things great and developing is what makes it perfect. And it's like, yet out of the top 100 movies ever made, probably half were created in the old Hollywood studio era, where every actor was a player, a contract player, every director was a full-time employee, every writer and art director was a full-time employee. And we'd make the movies that we consider to be the greatest of all time, we would make in 2 months, you know, and we would make 5 of those in a year from one team. You know, some of the greatest directors of all time would direct 3 movies a year. And that is so impossible at this point. Like the great directors of our time now make 1 every 5 years. And so I just think that there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen from the last 50 years of our industry to get back to a place where it's like, we do want to make things with a lean team. We do want to make them on our own, and like breaking the rules is a good thing.
I have a quick question then, because I'm familiar with your stuff. I know I think you're really intelligent, like with the business side. So Because what you just described, like the realization that like TikTok is television, right? And it still absolutely is. Like I meet with film producers that are like, oh yeah, I basically only, even though they make movies, they're like, I kind of just watch TikTok now. It's all I have time for. Like I haven't watched a movie in weeks. So like at the same time you're doing this, there's another streaming service that comes and goes, Quibi. If like, because so much of what you're saying in theory was what they were trying to do with Quibi during a time when everyone was home. And so many people have different theories about why it didn't work. Like, well, we were all home, so Quibi was meant to be like on the subway.
On the subway.
If, like from someone who
such a great publicist, like, line.
Yeah.
The headline in the Wall Street Journal was like, if only they let you stream to your TV. And I'm like,
yeah,
TikTok's the number one app in the world. Like, no one is the thing. It's just, this was the wrong concoction.
Yeah. So if that was like your company, like your business brain, what makes you say that failed? Because so much of that was attempting to do what you successfully did.
What's so funny though is it's the Hollywood that we're talking about. It was their version of short form, which is like they were bragging about spending $100,000 a minute. They're like, digital is usually $5,000 to $10,000 a minute. We're going to spend $100,000 a minute with the best directors and the best talent from Hollywood, and we're going to paywall it on a brand new app that you have to pay for. And the irony is like no young person cared about their talent in front of or behind the camera. We all know that the scripts actually weren't great. These were like the scripts that no one else in Hollywood wanted, which is why they had them. And at the same time, it's like no one, I mean, we watch TikTok and YouTube because they're free to watch platforms. Like if TikTok started out by saying, hey, you can't download this without paying $10 a month, it probably wouldn't be where it is today. And the other part of that is user generated content is incredible. And like the reason why YouTube and TikTok work is because they allowed that platform to be uploaded by any single person on earth. It's because of that. You have an unlimited amount of content. And because people gamify these algorithms, people in turn become better at creating content because they know what works and doesn't work. And so you have literally a billion people creating content of your platform every single week without you having to spend a single dollar who are learning what works and doesn't work. You're creating a new generation of artists. And I think, again, it's like to be able to say, oh, no, only these people can tell stories. And it can only be done in this way. It's just taking the wrong lessons of Hollywood, where it's like, let's gatekeep as much as possible. And I think part of that is what's so scary about TikTok and YouTube for so many people in Hollywood. It's like, well, sort of some gatekeeping is a good thing. And like, we do think that like only certain people should be able to make this. But in the amount of time it takes to make a movie now, it's like you do have a lot of young people out there who are making 50 movies, 50 short videos. And again, getting a lot better at knowing what like today's audiences actually want, which is a really powerful thing. So I think Katzenberg was right. I think the data he had said that people want short form content. And when they're on the go, they don't want to watch a half-hour Netflix show. They want to watch 50-minute long videos.
So this pops off. Okay, well, I have two questions, twofold. I agree with Nick. You have like the business savvy of like every producer, but like indie. What do you feel like, though, besides the fact that you were overconfident as a child to be emailing all these people, what do you also think? Because I think there's like very specific skill sets and just like personality traits that you have that you were like, I'm crazy enough to try this. But I also feel like you're very good with people. Like, what are the other things that you kind of feel like were like, I can make all these things?
I mean, I think part of it was, thank you, by the way. I think part of it is like, I did want to always make a splash, and so I did always try to figure out like, I think the best way to make a splash is to figure out like, where are things going and how can you sort of like be on the cutting edge instead of just being like, oh, I grew up watching this kind of movie, so I want to make that exact kind of movie. It's like, art is supposed to move forward. Like we are supposed to keep going and trying new things. And so podcasts at the time felt like that new thing. I was obsessed with scripted, podcasts. And I loved that, you were a part of many of them where they would be these scripted podcasts that turn into TV shows and movies like that. Audio is cheap. Even scripted audio is very cheap. You can make it sound like $1 billion and spend $100 on it. And that was super exciting to me. And so I think I just always had a curiosity of, how could you break these rules? Like, do you actually have to do things this way? And then at the same time, I think, especially during COVID, I started just having so much admiration for these young creators who like, because they grew up in a different generation, they grew up doing every single part of the process themselves. And they were also starting to be like, I don't care about this system that exists. Like we care about it because we grew up like admiring all these legacy, brands and we want their approval. But like the average kid out there that has 1 million subscribers today, you were to ask them like, do you want an HBO show? They'd be like, I have a show. And I think that's something for us to sort of like acknowledge.
No, I think it is really interesting because like we see more and more, a lot of people that we've talked to on here are sort of like, they do the content creation, but they also kind of have the Hollywood aspirations. And there are a lot of examples, like in the last 10 years, I think there are some people, like there's a YouTuber, I always talk about him, this guy, Chris Stuckman. He reviewed movies. Like I've been watching him for 10 years and he'd always wanted to make movies, but he was always told like, you're a YouTuber. Like it's lowbrow, even though you have like 1 million subscribers or whatever. And now he has this horror movie coming out this year with Neon, which is like this premier distributor right now. We have like a lot of young kids. There's like people, the kid who made the Backrooms thing is going to do an A24 movie. And I feel like, yeah, the crossover is like finally happening, but it is interesting because so many people we talk to are like, they're either on this side and they're trying to go over here, or like I kind of came in backwards because I was like a screenwriter and then I started making TikToks, and it's very interesting, but it is I feel like we're in that transition period, and a lot of people, like especially Hollywood, is kind of like scratching their heads, but they're like, oh, this is interesting, this is new. Yeah. But
think about this though, it's like back in the day, TV star was a bad word, and they made the Emmys because TV stars were not movie stars. And then what happened? Every movie star wanted to be on TV. And similarly, it's like they were YouTubers, they were TikTokers. It was a bad word. And what do you have now? Every famous person in Hollywood calling their agent and manager, being like, how do I get more followers on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube? And how do I have a podcast? Like they all want to be in digital because they feel like if they're not on digital, they're not relevant. And so I feel like the new thing is always looked down upon, and it's looked down upon until it becomes the norm. And it's funny, like this is why I sound like an old person when I say this, but like I think making content for TikTok and YouTube is punk rock because it's the thing that everyone looks down upon. It's like, that's a show. You call that a show? And it's like, it has a arc, it has a host, it looks like TV, and it's watched by millions of people. If that's not a show, I don't really know what else is. And, you know, the other thing is like, if Roku and Tubi can call what they're making shows, then someone on YouTube can call what they're making a show as well. And I think there's different levels of like, yeah, will we put more, you know, time and attention and detail into this? Like, sure. But like at the same time, you know, let the audience decide what they want to watch and not watch. And it's okay if you only have 200,000 viewers watching your thing, as long as they tune in every time. Like that's a lot of fucking people. You know, I would argue that most shows on cable television at this point, probably live, have less than 200,000 viewers. So I think it's all relative, but I agree with you that the industry is all becoming one. And I think that over time, we're not going to see it as like the creator space and traditional. It's more like it's all entertainment. You can do whatever version of it you want. You know, it's probably always going to be easiest to just give yourself a chance on these platforms and make your own content and see if people fall in love with you first. But I do think the way that Mr. Beast worked with Amazon is probably what we're going to see a lot more from creators, which is like, I'll work with you, Amazon or Netflix, if you can help me do something that I never otherwise would have been able to do. And I think it's even interesting seeing some of these creators who make documentaries that go to movie theaters where they actually are selling out multiple theaters. And they have really smart theatrical strategies because they know they can put, you know, butts in seats. And so that's an amazing way to make money. And I do think at the end of the day, like it just becomes like, if you're a painter, like what form of paint do you want to use? It's all, you know, it's all up to you. And I think I'm excited for when we get to a place where, you know, YouTube is a real, I hate to say it, wait for it to become a real place of television. It's the biggest streamer on earth.
Yeah, they have more numbers than Netflix. Yeah, way more.
But it's exciting to see like when there start being more like traditional production companies that exist for platforms like YouTube.
That was kind of like the thing I was going to ask. I feel like for us, and I don't know about you, Adam, if you still feel this way, I would make something independently and I would love it. But I think I still have that inkling to want to be accepted by Hollywood, where I'm like, I want Netflix to want me. Like, I still want that. Do you feel that way? And also, you kind of said like to some extent, some of the younger creators are like, I actually don't give a shit about that. Do you though feel like that?
I don't.
Whoa.
I that's probably been the biggest shift. Like for me, it's like, I want to be where we can reach the most amount of people possible. You know, we had an offer on the table for Boy Room to turn into a TV show. And it was an instant no, because it was like, I don't think our audience is going to watch it on that platform. And I would so much rather keep building it in a space where like millions and millions of people love watching it, love talking about it, than sort of then spend the next 2 years of my life in development. How like, I don't know what the value is. And, you know, that's not to say it'll never happen. I just think it will only happen at a time when it actually makes sense for the show that we're making. But otherwise, you know, I think what's really cool about being in the space is realizing that these companies are watching. A24 is looking at TikTok. Netflix is stealing from the creator space. And so, it's probably actually easier to get their attention by being in this space than by trying to go the traditional routes, because at this point, they do want to buy things that have eyeballs attached, and IP does exist now in the digital space.
And I think to what you're saying, it still is the story. Like, it's still the show. Like,
Yes.
we all can try and put something out, but like the thing that's going to break its way through has to be like just this absurdly high quality as far as like storytelling.
But I would even say, like, look, I grew up, for me coming back from like middle school, I turned on MTV every day, and like I loved Fantasy Factory, right? Like Fantasy Factory is one of my favorite shows. And you boil it down, that was like a guy who was famous and had a bunch of his best friends working for him, and he sort of ran a clothing company, and he had a big warehouse where they did stupid shit. I could draw a direct line from Fantasy Factory to like Nelk Boys and David Dobrik and be like, that is the same exact thing, just done a little bit differently with a few less people, and reach the same amount of people. And so I do think it's just the evolution. Like, so many shows that we make are a direct line from shows that we grew up watching, because it's just like evergreen IP. And I think the only thing that we're doing a little bit differently than other people in the space is like, we are trying to find those unscripted formats that like the three of us grew up watching. I think unscripted formats that are like real formats are some of the greatest, most genius things of all time. And I would love for some of our IP to eventually be in that category of like some of the best shows of all time. And, for us, like, we follow that cable TV rule of, we want someone to watch one episode, whether it's the first or 50th, and want to watch 100 more episodes. And so that really does mean you need to love the talent, but it has to be an idea that feels fresh enough every single time while still falling in like the sandbox of what you fell in love with the first.
Do you feel like when you get ideas for new shows, because I'm assuming you have like lots of ideas swirling, do you find a difference between like, oh, this show lives primarily on YouTube versus this show lives primarily as like very short form TikTok? Because like, I feel like I've gotten used to making my TikTok content. And then it's like, you look at YouTube and it's like, it's totally, you can't just transfer it. You can't just like make something for YouTube, splice it vertical, post it on here. Like, I feel like the formats are so different.
And I have, it's funny, like, we have no longer form shows right now. And part of that is I have so much respect for YouTube as a platform, because it is TV. And like, I only watch YouTube on my TV at this point. And so by the time that we start making stuff for actual YouTube and not YouTube Shorts, like, it better look really fucking good. And in the meantime, we're only focused on short form. What I will say, what's interesting is that some of those shows actually perform better on YouTube Shorts or on Instagram Reels. Like, there are times we come up for a show and we're like, oh, that's such a TikTok show. And there are, differences in the platforms that do allow for certain things to go viral and certain ones not to. But what I will say, the big focus this year now is building the brand of Gymnasium so that we can go make anything we want. Because right now, like, the honest truth is our success is completely, tied to our understanding of today's TikTok algorithm. Like, we know based on today's TikTok algorithm that if we like an idea, it's going to work. And that's fun. And it makes it that you see, really big numbers really quickly, but it's a really short-sighted strategy where it's just like, well, then what? Like, even if TikTok doesn't get banned or doesn't get sold, the algorithm will change at some point, and our what we like watching will change. And so the only way to protect against that is by having an actual fan base for Gymnasium, where people don't say like, hey, do you see that show that came on my feed? It's like, oh, Gymnasium's new show is so good. And I think there's a lot of things you're going to see change from us, part of which is like our talent becoming full-time at the company, hosting other formats other than their own. But we really do quickly want to have a lot more shows that are like internal network Gymnasium shows that are YouTube. And especially, I'm really inspired by the live streaming space. Like, I'm looking at creators like Kai Cenat and Aisha Speed, and I'm like, I think that is some of the most innovative stuff that's happening in all of entertainment right now. And I'm jealous. It looks like a lot of fun. And all I want is to have stuff like that here too.
Okay. And that's what's kind of to my like next question. So where does Gymnasium come in? And also, this is such a business question, but like, you guys got funding for that. And like, that is so, I think, intimidating to people. How did all of that come to be?
So post making these shows at the last company, it was enough of a kernel to be like, hey, there's definitely some there. And I just need to be able to have some time to go figure out what that is. We still didn't really know what the monetization was, other than like, yeah, brands will pay to be part of this content. And so we raised a very small amount of money, $750K, which has lasted us 2 years, which is pretty crazy. And in that time, we've made a bunch of new shows. We've grown the team to now 8 people. And Boy Room was the first time that we had a real partner. We partnered with Amazon, and we did 16 episodes where we started renovating the rooms, but still on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. And so we started seeing like what the economy actually looks like. A big thing that we're now doing as far as a like source of revenue for the company is we have like this brand IP studio where basically we've realized we're really good at working with brands and saying, hey, you essentially should be a TV network. You should be relying more on organic viewership than paid spend because kids are scrolling past your content within 2 seconds. And if you can make shows that are actually loved by, real people, you're going to have much more brand loyalty than anything else. And so we've started working with a lot of these like Fortune 500 companies where we say, hey, we're going to apply the same thinking that, goes for making gymnasium shows, but instead do it in the universe of your brand and create these formats that live on these platforms that are loved by millions. That is now where we're focusing most of our efforts on monetizing because we're sort of taking the money we make from that side of the company to have more fun at Gymnasium. But again, like I said, the big focus for this year is really becoming a real network. And the biggest shift there is making our talent be full-time and just getting to work with them way more. Because after 12 months of also meeting with a lot of creators thinking like, hey, what we do might be easier if we work with people already at platforms. What I will say is like, it sort of took the fun out of it. And when I think about working with Kareem or working with Rachel on Boy Room, my favorite part of the process is finding someone who we know has the goods, who would be the most famous person if only they had that right format or given the right chance. And I want Gymnasium to be that incubator of talent, just like SNL has been for 50 years. And I would argue that 90% of the talent we work with forever will always be completely undiscovered, that we just see something in.
Process wise, is it kind of the same as the Taxi show? Like it's sort of like, let's find a person that we really like. And then do you go to them when you're like developing these ideas and just say, what have you always wanted to do?
So up until now, it's sort of been that where it's like, Rachel for Boy Room, I went to a comedy show. She opened for a friend of mine. I was obsessed with her. She came in, pitched 5 shows. And one was like, every time I've ever slept over at a guy's place, I wish I could investigate their room. And I'm like, that's just so good. And that's a show that, again, we filmed the pilot the following Friday and we put it out 2 weeks later. And like 3 weeks after that was like front page of the New York Times. And that works until it doesn't. And I think, again, the last 12 months, we spent a lot of time bringing comedians in trying to find those ideas. And what we've realized now is like, we really wanted to grow our internal team. So a lot of those ideas came from the inside. But now with having talent be full-time as well, it's sort of like you're developing ideas for the talent we have. And so that's where it is, in a weird way, kind of becoming SNL, where it's like teams of creatives and talent and people in front of and behind the camera all working together to be like, well, what should we make together here? And I'm really excited to start seeing the new types of shows that start coming out. We have one that's coming out in a few weeks called Roommate Court, which is basically small claims court for roommates in their apartments. And it's hosted by this amazing comedian named Michael Aber, who's just like doing his own version of Judge Judy. But it's a really great show. And like that came completely from the inside. And Michael then was sort of like attached to it.
So in that, okay, twofold question. You want to grow Gymnasium brand. I feel like, we all know when we see an A24 movie. And I also feel like these creators that you get in probably are like, I want to have the show and I want to have my personal so that like the show can grow. But I also need to know if the show ends, I've got something on that. How are you managing both of those things? Because I'm assuming you're like, we will help you. We're all helping each other here.
The thing. It's like before talent being full time, I always just as a friend of theirs wanted them to grow their own platforms, but we didn't have a vested interest in doing so. It's sort of like, we hope that the show makes you famous and you get to go do whatever you want. I think now that we're transitioning into full-time talent, we have way more of a vested interest of wanting them to grow their own channels because like we see them as Gymnasium. Even if that means they one day leave Gymnasium, it's like they are the thing that is more recognizable than any logo will ever have. And so as a result of being full-time, it's like, of course we want them to then use our teams to make their own sketch content and their own videos that they want to be making for just their own pages, because like that helps us too. And it just kind of also proves everything that we're wanting to do, which is like, is incubating that next generation of talent. And so I think like a big part of working with them is also we're excited about the live space. We'd love to go on tour and like have our talent do, whether it's comedy shows or formats or whatever, and so that only happens by making our talent bigger. And I think even with Rachel, it's like Rachel has 40,000 followers, I want to say, on Instagram, and the show has a combined like 300 and change thousand followers across the internet. Like I want Rachel to have over 200,000 followers. I want her to have more followers than the show. Like that just only helps us, and it's what's right. So that's what's a big change for us this year. We're definitely going to be focusing a lot more on building our individual talents followings.
Do you think that, because again, I'm fascinated by the business side, just because so much of this podcast has turned into a lot of people talking about what's happening in Hollywood right now, how to fix it, like what does the future hold? It's just such a weird time. What you have done, which is kind of created this new form. You're spending you said the money is, getting you through so much time. You're investing in talent. Like, is there a world where what you've done translates into like what Hollywood needs to do right now? Like, or are those two things completely different? Like, I know we talked about theaters a little bit, but do you think there's anything that you've done that can like translate into where entertainment has to go? Because it's obviously like we're in yet another period where everything is changing again.
I mean, I think it's the thinking behind it. It's not like the model itself, but it's sort of like, why do we need to go to these people to make the thing that we need to make? And so, yes, if we're sort of thinking the only way that we can do our dream is to make this $10 million movie, it's like, we might need to start thinking differently. And, what I say to everybody is like, Lena Dunham got to make Girls after making Tiny Furniture. And Tiny Furniture went to Sundance and Judd Apatow saw it, and the rest is history. Like, Tiny Furniture, that moment will happen again, but it will be on YouTube. And I think that all of us sort of need to like hedge our like scoffing, at that sentence, because like, I think what scares people is views are public, and they're scared of putting something on the internet, and they spend all this time and energy and money onto it, and it gets 100 views. And what does that mean for them? And what I say is like, look, if it's truly good and you stand by it, over time, it will get views anyway. And to be honest, who cares? Because, as you upload more and more, you're going to develop a following of people that are obsessed with your unique individual voice. But you have to get over that fear. Like this idea of like, I'm going to make a short film to get in a film festival. Even if you win the film festival, like what's going to happen? You're going to put it on a Vimeo behind a password link, and like maybe some agent looked at it. And then you're going to be in development for 2 to 3 years. And maybe that production company at that point lost their money. And now you just wasted 3 years of your life where no one knows your name because that film was never seen in the first place. Like, we have this insane opportunity where we have 2 platforms right now that are watched by over 1 billion people every single day. And those views are up for grabs. And so like, what's interesting is, I'm sure we've all read that book, Easy Riders and Raging Bulls. Like, we're in that moment in time again. And like, they broke all the rules in filmmaking to create a new version of Hollywood, and everyone hated what they were making. People hated the French New Wave of movies, right? They looked at that and said, that's not cinema. Like, how dare you call it a movie? And it became a lot of what cinema was. And so I think that, again, it's like, we need to stop looking at these TikTok, platforms like TikTok and YouTube and looking down upon them as like, oh, that's like what the kids like. It's like, we should realize that the world is changing and that we could create a new Hollywood by thinking a little differently.
Bouncing off that, I saw this great clip. It must have been, I think it was an interview of you like way back, but you were kind of like mid rant, and I don't know what the context of the clip was, but you were talking about how you shouldn't spend $100,000 making a short that you just want to like send to Sundance. And I really loved it because like I went to film school at USC, and there were people who made short films that were like $150,000 budget. And you look at like everything we're talking about, how even TikTok, like if you just have a phone, like they have a $10 wireless mic on YouTube, like you really don't need, it's crazy to me that people are spending that kind of money still on short films, which are not really monetizable. Like make a $10,000 feature, not a $100,000 short film, but for somehow it's like still a thing.
And that's the thing. I mean, like, again, like Kristen, like go back to the radio dramas moment. Like those were made fairly inexpensively, and they got huge talent on board by saying, hey, you're going to be EPs on this thing. And if and when it ever does turn into a TV show, you're going to have this back end percentage that you never otherwise would have had you just been offered this story. And I do think there's a world for scripted on these platforms too, where you have similar deals where it's like, look, let's go make 12 episodes that are each 1.5 minutes long. Let's put it on TikTok. The thing's going to cost us in total, maybe it's going to still cost $50,000, but we're going to get 12 episodes out of it. And our hope is by the end of the 12 episodes, we've generated at least enough interest and attention that getting people talking to go back to these networks and studios, or maybe a brand who wants to pay for the next 12 episodes. Like we have to start getting more creative. And I think like we all need to just believe that a lot of the old guards are going to die. They're too big. They're too bloated. They're too slow. They have too many investors that want the wrong things out of them. And they're not standing up for the Hollywood that we want to exist. Like they're not defending what you guys want to make, like these are companies that want to squeeze any last remaining profit out of the IP that they own in their library. Like that's what their mandate is. And so, yes, there are rare exceptions like Neon and A24, and like, thank God they do exist. But like, there can be more that exist by taking an entirely new direction, which is being in a space that they're not even in yet, which is digital.
And I kind of wanted to talk about that because I love what you do. Like, I think the show, I'm like giggling at these shows and I'm like, oh, I can watch any episode at any time. I think that is kind of the fear of, and YouTube, it could be done. You can do the Issa Rae route. I think I'm obsessed with TikTok, but people often ask me and I'm like, I don't know. I have not cracked a scripted code to TikTok because the randomization of the algorithm. Have you thought about that at all? Or would you be like, that has to go to YouTube?
The reason I still love short form is it's the easiest place to launch IP. Like I think YouTube, if you're still talking the 5 to 12 minute range, like it's just going to cost more money. And so, short form is a great space for that. There's a great scripted short form series called Brooklyn Coffee Shop, where it's like these two baristas that work in Brooklyn and every episode's a new customer walking in. And so I do think it's like, again, take the old days of network television before TiVo, where it's like, you watch shows like Friends and Seinfeld, like you could watch any episode of that show, even if you've never watched it before, and you do know enough about the characters to enjoy it. Like, I think we need to treat TikTok like network television, YouTube like network television, and create these shows that sort of could be watched at any point. And eventually, again, over time, if people fall in love with your voice, that doesn't mean that you can't go then do your show that should be serialized in order. You have to watch these 12 episodes. They come out on this day and people tune in and watch them. But you do need to tell people who you are first, and you need to get people to fall in love with your voice. And so like, there are kids on TikTok that are making scripted horror shorts every single week. And there's some of the scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. And they each get millions of views. And I'm like, these kids are the next James Wan. You can't tell me otherwise. And one of them obviously is the Backrooms kid, is doing an A24 movie now. But like, these kids are going to have huge movie deals in front of them very soon. And that is a great way for traditional Hollywood to work with these kids, where it's like, hey, we've been watching what you're doing for 2 years. Like, what would $1 million do to you? Like, what could you make for $1 million? And by the way, those same kids are going to squeeze so much more out of that $1 million because, again, they've been making things for free for 2 years.
There is actually this is a random pitch to you. There is a mom and daughter. The daughter lives in New York and the mom lives like a train ride away. And they are like the Gilmore Girls of today. Like the mom comes in and they go on their shopping trips and they go out to eat. And I watch their lives and I'm like, it is scripted. Like, it's not scripted. It is their real lives. But like, I am so entrenched in that. And I'm like, that's the next show. Like, I'm watching it like it's a TV show.
I think, again, like we think about shows as like these like very premium things, but like, I would say that Veronica is cool and Kyle, and their love story, which was filmed on an iPhone, it's all scripted. That was a fucking movie. I was a movie that I watched in 50 parts. And like, it was literally just filmed with an iPhone. So like, again, I think like there's so much unlearning that like all of these things that we think give us value, which is a proper set and a proper crew and the proper cameras. But it's like, no, like it is the story and it is the talent. And sometimes all you need is those two things in an iPhone to get that out there to millions of people.
Are you still, even though you're so wrapped up in this world now, you said before that you were like the film guy and like the pretentious. Do you still watch like tons of films? Like, are there young creative people, like you said, you might not be going back to Sundance, but are you still like watching a ton of that kind of stuff?
I'm definitely trying to a lot more now. I think like the first 2 years that I was in this space, I definitely was on a little bit of like a fuck Hollywood kick. And I probably talked like that too. And then I like got to a place where I was like, I still have a Criterion Channel subscription and I do want to watch more of those movies. So, I think like at the end of the day, I always want to watch better things. I want to read books, more books. Like I want to become a better human every year. And so like, I do think going to the movies is part of that. And so I'm starting to watch more TV and movies again, but sometimes I do have to force myself because again, like I would probably rather be in my phone.
Oh, 2 hours will go by and I'm like, shit, I really meant to watch like XYZ episode today. And it just like didn't happen.
Like I still have not watched the Severance finale and I don't know how.
And you haven't been spoiled?
No, somehow I've just like swiped past.
That is impressive.
And I am excited to watch the studio too. Like I know I'm gonna get like geek out over the studio.
The studio's it's really good. It's like the perfect of what I feel like. And I also feel like it's very valid that like, it's really I feel like you had your frustration before everyone else did with Hollywood. Like, I feel like you being so in it, because now I feel like every person is on edge about like what they do. And you are 2 years ahead of
But
everyone.
what I would say is like, first of all, it's still the wild, wild west. And like, I know the feeling in traditional right now, because anytime I talk to my friends, it's like they're on antidepressants and they're like a day away from blowing their brains out. And I'm like, I cannot tell you that once you get out of this and you look at the other side, it's nothing but like excitement and energy that you've never seen before, because it's an industry that's like growing exponentially every single year. So you'll never talk to a creator who's like, unless they don't have a following anymore, maybe they did 5 years ago, but like you're not going to talk to a creator who's anything but excited. So back to the film festival days. I went to the Cannes Film Festival twice. The first time was 2016. The second time was 2017. Arguably incredible times for Hollywood, right? Brand new tech money. Streamers were buying shit up. And so there's a lot of new money in the industry. And it was an amazing time to go to the film festival. I then didn't go for years. And last year, for the first time, I went to Cannes Lion, which is the advertising conference, where every brand in the world and every ad agency goes for their Oscars of the ads. When I tell you, my jaw dropped when I walked on the Crescent and saw how much bigger Cannes Lion was to Cannes Film Festival. I mean, I'm not joking. It was probably 20 to 30 times bigger than the Cannes Film Festival, where every single private beach club in the Crescent is taken over by Meta and Pinterest and Google and WPP and FIFA and Spotify, which throws basically Coachella every single day, where we saw Arcade Fire and Benson Boone and Tyla and Zed and all these insane artists. Justice. There is so much money in the world of brands, and brands have always been the supporters of entertainment. It's why we have the history of television that we have today. And especially as we head towards maybe a global depression that was self-inflicted by our current president, brands are going to more quickly take that money away from television and start saying, where do we need to put it? Because by the way, it needs to go somewhere. And those ad agencies will make sure that money goes somewhere, because if they don't, their jobs don't exist anymore. But that money needs to go somewhere. And the only reason that late night still exists is because there's not a late night online. The second that there starts being an actual late night online that all the three of us and everyone else starts watching, late night probably won't exist on TV anymore. There's no competition. And so like, that's where I think it's a really interesting time to be a producer in the space, or be someone who's a writer in the space, because you get to go look at like, oh, you kind of can recreate the entire history of television as we know it on the internet. And all those formats are still relevant. You need to just find a new way and a new spin and, keep the audience's attention. And it might be a little bit shortened than it used to be. But let's be real. There's a lot of filler in network television as is, and you probably could slim a good 15 minutes off any of those formats.
Are you doing a live late night show? Is that what I would to be expected?
I'll be totally honest. Like, again, we bootstrapped this company. We raised $750K. That money is now gone, and we're relying entirely sort of on our like brand IP studio at this point. If we needed to, we could keep bootstrapping this company forever. I don't really want to. I'd love to go build MTV. I'd love to go build NBC. And that takes a lot more money, even in the space of much smaller budgets. And so I do think like we are looking at what would it look like to go raise another round, and like what would be possible sort of at every level of financing that's available. So trust me, there's nothing I would rather love than have this huge office downtown and make TRL and make Late Night and make Saturday Night Live and all these shows. And hopefully we're in a place to do that soon.
Wow, look at us, Nick. We both were like, wait a second. Did you just hint at two very clear things? That would be really fun. I do love, everyone's really loving the pit right now. And I'm really enjoying just like the timing, like even White Lotus, like the studio, I like to know that there's a girl who does live coffee in the morning. Like it just is like a Q&A, and she's there every morning. And it's just like comforting to me, that I think will be attractive again.
It's amazing. And again, it's like, it's a community. And I think everyone's pretty lonely. And that's why we're spending a lot of time on the internet. And what feels less lonely than being alone on the internet is being alone watching a creator or a format that you love live, while you're also engaging with all the other people that are similar to you that are watching it. And so, I think that is why you have a lot of success in the streamer space. And even like morning shows, like all of this stuff serves a purpose. It's just like, who has a fucking antenna on their TV and knows how to tune into this stuff? So I just think, again, it's like, there's a reason why the hosts of all the shows I just mentioned are in their like 50s and 60s. It's because like, that's what their audience is. And so it does just take a little bit of money, a little bit of balls, and like building a stage to just try some of this stuff out. But I do think if you build it, they will come.
when I think about my entire childhood, I think about coming out and smelling my parents making coffee and like morning show voices on the TV. Similarly, at night, falling asleep, I hear those people on the TV. Like it's interesting because like basically what you're saying about all of this stuff is that the format was right. The people are trying to reinvent it now. Let's put Letterman on Netflix or something like that. It's not the same. You just have to update it instead of changing it. It still works.
We made those shows because everyone was on TV. And they're like, holy shit, everyone's on TV. Let's make more shows for these people. And not only that, I mean, don't forget, like when our parents were young, TV turned off at a certain point. Like at 2 a.m, TV would just not exist. Maybe it was midnight. I forget what the time was. And they'd play the Star Spangled Banner and then it would just shut off. Here comes Ted Turner and he's like, hey, wait, there's a thing called cable and we can have 24-hour news. And now everything was like 24 hours on television all of a sudden. And so like, I just think it takes people like that, again, in this era to be like, we're all consuming more entertainment than we ever have in our entire lives, than any other generation. That's a huge opportunity. And it feels like for some reason, that opportunity is lost on Hollywood because they're stuck in their own ways. It's like, that is a gold rush. Like, this is 1849. Like, we can create a brand new Hollywood. And by the way, as someone who's an Angelino, like, I do hope that this eventually goes back to LA because nothing makes me sadder than coming home and seeing all of my friends be worried about where their next job is and seeing nothing but for lease signs on every business that I used to go to. So I do think that like Hollywood has to reinvent itself and it has to be on the internet and it has to be, giving a microphone to a whole new generation of voices.
And it is interesting because me and Nick get this a lot with our TikToks, like producers do reach out to us and they're like, hey, I want to learn about you and what you're doing. And like, how does TikTok work? And I think they're kind of scared of it. Like they're just intimidated by it. And I don't really know. I mean, you're right. You need a little bit of money and you need to just convince one of these producers to be like, I also think to your extent, I always tell people, I'm like, you gotta throw a few things at the wall. Not everything's gonna stick. And like, you have to be okay with that. Like the video getting 100 views, you could just slice it differently, put a different caption on the text or on the video, and it could go bonkers.
And by the way, like what I always say too is like the only reason that I look at these platforms like television is because I'm probably the last age of someone who like my formative years were coming home from school and watching TV. Like I grew up with TV. I was a Nickelodeon kid, and then I was an MTV kid, and then I was like a Food Network and NBC kid, right? Like that was sort of my, growing up. Kids below me didn't grow up with television. They grew up with streaming. And so like television itself already changed in their mind. And so like 13-year-olds today, they don't know what fucking television is. Like they're not watching anything on TV. And very simple, like a weird analogy I'm going to say is that when we were in the cord cutting era, when the streamers were growing, there was a lot of attention on, well, why aren't there that many people cutting the cord yet? And it's like, that's the stat you should be looking less at and more at how many millennials were buying cable. Very few. And very similarly, it's like we're thinking right now about like, oh, these streamers, like they're not really losing, they're still gaining subscribers, and it's like, okay, but how much of Gen Z will pay for their own? And so I just think that we're always sort of looking in the wrong place. And as a result, like we hold on to things longer than we probably should. And so that's not to say that Netflix won't still be a form of television. I think Netflix will probably be maybe the only form of television for a while in the paid streamer space. But again, it is to say that like those of us who did grow up with formats in TV, we can still keep TV, our version of TV alive by being on these platforms that these kids are on. We can make sure that those 13-year-olds do know what a TV show is by making sure that we create those formats. And so I think it's like the half glass empty way of looking at these platforms is the classic like, oh, it sucks that this is how kids are watching content today. And it's like the half glass full is like they've never watched more. They're obsessed with what they're watching. The creators and the talent that they're watching, they've never been more obsessed with. So that's a huge opportunity. And like, what's our place in it?
It's a constant steamroll of, you were talking earlier about how it's like you have 1 billion users making content, but you also have 1 billion people swiping really, really fast. And so it's like we need to like keep feeding the hamster wheel. It's like there's a need for it that's never been there before.
Something that's really interesting is like the Twitch streamers in particular, or streamers in general. I mean, I don't consume Twitch. I'm not on Twitch. I'm not on Kick. I'm not on Rumble. But I somehow know every single thing that Speed and Kai Cenat are up to because the clips of that content are all over my TikTok and X. They don't make those clips. They don't pay for them.
Fan-generated content.
15-year-olds who are obsessed with them the armies of 15-year-olds are spending all their time trying to make their favorite creator go viral. And so it's like, truly, if you build it, they will come. Like, even if you did build that morning show or that late night show, it does have to be a different version and a little bit crazier and something that young people actually want to watch. But like, I guarantee you pretty quickly, you're going to have a bunch of young kids who are also trying to do the same thing, which only helps your show at the end of the day because it means you're constantly in culture.
Oh, Made on Netflix. Made had a great run, the show with Margaret Qualley. And then all of a sudden, like 8 months later, some fan made a fan edit, and it shot back up to number 2 from one edit of just like, what was the scene? Like, I want to watch that show. Like, that is conversion power that is kind of unbelievable.
And in Netflix, I would say, is probably the best at using TikTok. I mean, a lot of this at this point, like, you can hire some of these clip armies. Like, they are for sale. There's even like a new clipping marketplace on WAP.com where you can like set a budget of like WHOP, where you can essentially create a budget of like, hey, I'm going to give $10,000 as a bonus fund. The only way you can start accessing that $10,000 is if a video you makes with my content, it gets over 1 million views. It gets over 2 million
Whoa.
views. You don't pay the kids until that content goes over that threshold that you set. And so essentially, just having the $10,000 available means you now have access to an army of kids who are doing this just to maybe make a few $100, and you only if it works. So like, the tech
That's
is
wild.
every year. And I just think that, again, like, a lot of this does just mean that it is easier to create talent from scratch than it used to be.
I would have made bank. I was like making my MySpace customized and like putting all of these
I
like
made, like,
stars.
fan edits on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, are freaks.
Oh my God. Okay. So what would you say? What are you like most excited about for you, Gymnasium? And like, I know you were kind of talking about like in the next year and you've got your creators on board, but like, is there anything specific that you're like, watch out for this?
Taking much bigger bets. I think like 3 years ago, the question was like, what does it look like to make a TV show on TikTok? I think at this point, I've stopped even saying Gymnasium is a short form company. Like, I think we have an ideology that the internet is television, and we want to make our favorite studio, that we make the things that we want to watch on the internet. There's a lot more companies making short form content in the space today. What I would caution all of them is it's starting to feel a lot like this is just like a business of slop, where it's like, oh, this thing gets 5 million views, so that means we should just double down on making more of this content. Like, just because it works today doesn't mean it should be what your business tomorrow is. And like, I'm not in this space because I think it's a good business. I'm in this space because I want to have a 40-year career producing. And I think that this is the only place that I want to be producing today. And so like, my bet is always going to be on talent in front of and behind the camera and nothing else. And I just want to be able to have a much bigger playground to take bigger bets on those people that I believe in. I would say in general, what I'm excited for our space, like the collective of us in Hollywood, is like, there's no better time than when the industry is falling apart to make a name for yourself and create a new industry in its place. Like, this is a complete revolution. And yes, a lot of the powers that be will fail and won't exist anymore. And that's not a bad thing. We have complained for 20, 30, 40 years that these people haven't allowed us to tell the stories that we want to tell. That if only we can convince this 75-year-old white dude that this is the right script for him to buy into, that like, I'm going to have my story. Fuck them. Like, it's not time to keep looking up to these people. Like, it's never, you've not only never, it's not only never been cheaper to produce content, it's never been easier to reach those people that are watching these platforms. So if you're not spending every minute of your life trying to figure out like, how can I tell my story on these platforms and build the name for myself so I can go make the movies that I want to go make one day, you're wasting your time. Like, there's a huge opportunity and it's nothing but a good thing.
I'm revved up.
Nick's like, I'm going to go write my scary horror TikTok right now. I mean,
the last thing I would say is like, I actually do think I've realized lately that, especially being in this space, like, part of my job is like hyping up our industry, because I think we've been depressed for way too long and like down in the dumps that like, this is the worst time to be a filmmaker, and it's anything but the truth. And so like, if I have to be the guy on the other side of the aisle because I've made so much stuff on TikTok in the last few years and I know what's possible, I will, because it does translate to our industry. It does translate to scripted, and it is where we're going to find the new generation of filmmakers that like define our generation.
Yeah. And I do. I mean, it is nice to be hyped up. I also think, to like your point, you already know what worked or didn't work. Like, curation is going to become important. Like what you're saying, like, you can't have all slop. Like, there will be stories that make it to the top, creators that make it to the top, which they already do.
And you're never going to build a brand off of slop. You're just not.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, okay, wait, we have one final question before we let you go off on your merry, busy Friday. We always ask our guests for a high, low, or a hell no of working in this industry. You just have to do one, experience wise.
I'll do a high. I'll do a positive one. So that's that first driver from Keep the Meter Running that we had on the show. We never really spoke with him again, other than we know that somehow that content like blew up in Pakistan on a different streaming service, and like everyone in Pakistan had seen the episode, and he was like so proud, and his family was so proud of him. About a year later, we get a phone call from him that he had just been in a car accident, and all of a sudden he had not driven for 2 months, and he was not going to be able to drive for another 6 months after that. Like someone T-boned him, his car flipped over, and he was really, really injured. And he was really ashamed to ask for help. And so he didn't really ask for help, but we knew if he was calling us, it was for help. And so we had never asked, the audience to Keep the Meter Running to do anything. And in fact, we didn't really know, like, could we do anything with our audience? At that point, the show wasn't really even on Instagram in the first place. And so Kareem and I went to his apartment, and we like shot a video with him where he could just tell his story, and where we could say like, hey, like this man allowed for this show to exist. If it wasn't for him being the first driver, the show probably never would have worked in the way that it did. And like the very least we could do for him is like help him get back on his feet, or at least support his family while he can't drive. And we put it on GoFundMe. And I think in 24 hours, we raised something like 50 grand. And it was like, again, evidence of like, people care. It's not just mindless watching. Like it is people that care about these stories and feel, a connection to who's talking to them. And so it was like such a high note of like, holy fuck, like that actually changed this man's life. And it was the reason why he could, it's not that much, but it is a lot to him. And he, thanks us to this day and writes us notes. And it's the most incredible thing.
Oh, wait, that's
so nice.
amazing. Oh my God. That's a very nice high.
It's a Friday. If it was a Monday, I'd give you a low.
That's really, really valid. You were so optimistically positive. This was not wild, but it's a nice, like, refreshing.
72 degrees in New York. So